All right, ready to dig in. We're on a deep dive today, folks, talking about a career path that you probably haven't given much thought to, but maybe you should have. Because thanks to RoleCatcher, we've got a mountain of info about well digging.
That's right.
And, spoiler alert, this isn't your grandpa's well digging gig.
Definitely not.
We're talking high-tech gear,
Yeah.
environmental responsibility, even a little bit of adventure. So, let's get our hands dirty, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right, so first things first, when we say well digger, in this day and age, what are we actually talking about? What does a modern well digger do?
Well, it's interesting because a well digger today, they're kind of like a highly skilled surgeon, but instead of operating on a patient, they're operating on the earth.
Mm.
They use these huge drilling rigs, super specialized tools to create and then maintain wells. And those wells, that's how we extract all kinds of essential resources. Water, obviously, but also oil, gas, even minerals.
So we're talking about a career path that takes you from like massive oil fields to construction sites, even some pretty remote and rugged locations, according to the RoleCatcher guide.
Yeah.
What kind of person thrives in that kind of environment?
Well, it's definitely a career that attracts, I think, a specific kind of person. You got to be someone who really likes to work with their hands, who isn't afraid of, getting a little dirt under their fingernails, and who, frankly, enjoys a job that changes as much as the weather does. This is not a desk job, that's for sure.
Right.
Well, digging demands physical strength, obviously, but you need serious technical skills, too. And you got to have grit. You're often outside, exposed to the elements, dealing with heavy machinery, and you need to solve problems on the fly.
Yeah, it's interesting. The RoleCatcher guide even has a whole pros and cons section. What were some of the things that jumped out at you?
One of the biggest pros is the job security. We're talking about a career where, in many parts of the world, especially places that are really struggling with water scarcity, skilled well diggers are worth their weight in gold. Plus, there's something deeply satisfying about working with your hands, building something tangible, playing a part in extracting resources that literally power our world. It's pretty incredible.
Absolutely. But the guide also mentions that there are some pretty intense challenges that come with this line of work, right?
Oh, absolutely. The work can be really physically demanding and sometimes even dangerous. I mean, you are dealing with heavy machinery, you're often working at heights and frequently in pretty remote locations. So safety training is paramount. But even then, accidents can happen. Plus, the hours can be long and unpredictable. This is not a 9 to 5 kind of gig. You might be working long shifts, weekends, holidays, you name it.
So not for the faint of heart.
Not at all.
Speaking of things that get the heart racing,
Right.
let's talk about the technology because the guide mentions things like automation, robotics, directional drilling. There was even this whole section on something called hydraulic fracturing. And these don't exactly sound like your grandpa's well-digging tools.
You're telling me this is a field where ancient techniques are meeting cutting-edge innovation.
Wow.
Like directional drilling, for example. This is like something out of a sci-fi movie, right?
Hmm.
Imagine using GPS technology and these incredibly specialized drill bits to navigate underground. And I mean, not just straight down, but horizontally.
Wow.
With incredible precision, they can access resources that we used to think were totally out of reach.
That's incredible. And then there's hydraulic fracturing, which I'll admit I had to do a little side research on this one.
Yeah.
It's a pretty controversial topic, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a technique that's used to extract oil and natural gas from the shale rock formations that are deep, deep underground. What they do is they inject this high-pressure mixture of water, sand, and chemicals to fracture the rock and release the resources that are trapped inside.
Okay.
Now, it's been a game changer in terms of, boosting energy production. There's no doubt about that. But it has sparked a ton of debate about its potential impact on groundwater, on seismic activity, even on the environment as a whole.
Sounds like a situation where with great technological power comes great responsibility. It's a good reminder that progress isn't always a straight line and that there are always trade-offs to consider. So, okay, let's say someone's listening to this right now and they're thinking, sign me up. They're ready to, ditch the desk job, grab a hard hat, maybe hop on a drilling rig. What's the actual career path look like for a well digger?
Well, RoleCatcher does a pretty good job of laying out the progression, and it's not just about, brawn over brains. You actually need both. It often starts with an apprenticeship where you're learning the ropes from these seasoned well diggers, really mastering safety protocols and just getting a feel for the tools and the technology.
So it's very much like hands-on experience from day one.
Oh, absolutely. Think of it like, learning a trade. Except instead of, I don't know, woodworking, you're working with these like massive drilling rigs and high pressure systems.
Yeah.
As you gain experience, you climb that ladder, right? So you go from junior well digger to intermediate well digger. And with each step, you're taking on more responsibility. You're starting to analyze geological data. You're figuring out, the best places to drill. You're even mentoring newer recruits.
So you're basically leveling up in a video game, but with real world and like kind of high stakes implications.
That's a great way to put it.
Eventually, you reach what I guess is the top of the well digging pyramid, the senior well digger.
Yeah.
What sets those folks apart?
Okay, so these are the strategic masterminds, right? These are the people who are not only overseeing the entire well digging operation, but they're also the ones who are responsible for things like risk evaluation. We're talking about things that could go wrong: geological instability, environmental hazards. They've got to analyze all of that and make sure that the entire operation runs smoothly and, most importantly, safely.
Wow. That's a lot more high-level decision-making than I think people realize goes into well digging.
Yeah.
So let's get really practical for a second. Someone's listening to this, they're inspired, they're like, I'm tough, I can handle it, I got the grit. But how do they actually get their foot in the door? Because there was this whole section in the RoleCatcher guide called Beat the Automated Recruiter. And it kind of sounds like a digital battleground out there these days.
It really is. I mean, it used to be that your resume only had to impress, a human being, but now it's got to get past the algorithms first.
Right.
Companies use these things called applicant tracking systems, or ATS, and they basically scan your resume for very specific keywords, skills, qualifications. And if you're not speaking the robot's language,
You're out.
it's over before it even began.
So how does RoleCatcher help someone navigate that, that digital maze?
Well, they've got this amazing tool that I wish I had had when I was applying for jobs. It's a skills analysis tool. And what it does is it actually breaks down the exact skills that are most in demand for well digging jobs. We're talking, technical proficiency, problem solving, communication, all of that. And then it helps you tailor your resume and your cover letter to highlight those skills, to make sure that they actually jump out both to a human and to a computer. They even have this cool AI-powered interview practice tool where you can actually practice answering common interview questions and get feedback on your performance.
So it's like having a career coach, but in your pocket. Now, we've talked about the physical demands of well digging, but what about some specific skills? What are some things that someone who's serious about this should really be brushing up on?
Well, mechanical aptitude is huge. You are going to be operating and maintaining complex machinery, so having a good understanding of how things work is absolutely essential. Then there's problem solving, because, out in the field, especially when you're dealing with the earth, things don't always go according to plan.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to think on your feet and adapt to unexpected challenges.
It's like a giant high-stakes puzzle, it sounds like.
In a lot of ways, it is.
Are there any other skills that you think might surprise people that they wouldn't necessarily associate with, well digging?
Communication and teamwork are so important in this field, and I think that surprises some people. Even though you are working with these massive machines, you're not out there alone. You're part of a team. You're collaborating with engineers, geologists, other crew members, and being able to communicate effectively, to work together as a cohesive unit, that is crucial.
It's a good reminder that, even in these fields that might seem really solitary, those what we call soft skills, those are still so important. We talked a little bit earlier about some of the challenges of well digging, but are there any that you think are really unique to this field? Like the guide mentioned working in remote locations. What does that actually entail?
Yeah, that's a big one. We're talking about, being potentially miles from civilization, having to deal with extreme weather conditions, maybe even a curious wildlife encounter here and there.
Wow.
Takes a special kind of person to not just survive, but thrive in that environment. Someone who's adaptable, resourceful, not afraid of a little solitude.
It's like a crash course in self-reliance, it sounds like.
Mm.
We've been talking a lot about, the technical skills, the challenges, but what about the environmental aspect? I mean, it seems like that would be a major consideration in a field like this.
It absolutely is. Modern well diggers, they're acutely aware of their responsibility to protect the environment.
Right.
One wrong move could contaminate groundwater or disrupt a delicate ecosystem. So they undergo really rigorous training on how to, prevent spills, minimize surface disturbance, and then how to properly restore the land as much as possible after the drilling is complete.
That's good to hear. It sounds like a huge responsibility, but it's reassuring to know that they're taking all those precautions.
Absolutely. And it's only going to become more important as we, as a planet, face the realities of climate change and dwindling resources. Well diggers are really on the front lines of ensuring that we have access to the resources that we need, but they also play a really crucial role in protecting the planet for generations to come.
It's a side of the job you don't always hear about.
Right.
So we've talked about, where things stand today, but what about the future? Any predictions about where the whole field of well digging is headed?
Well, get ready because the future of well digging is starting to look a lot like, well, science fiction movie.
Uh,
We're talking about a massive wave of automation and robotics coming to like revolutionize the whole industry.
wow.
Think remotely operated drilling rigs, robots that can handle those, crazy heavy pipes and equipment, even AI-powered systems that can analyze geological data in real time.
So, like, are we talking about like a well digging version of those self-driving cars everyone's talking about these days?
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And it's not just about, making the job easier, although I'm sure well diggers aren't going to complain about that. The really big deal here is safety and efficiency. Imagine a world where you can significantly reduce the risk of human error, where you can minimize the environmental impact even further, where you can access resources that we previously thought were like totally off limits because they were too difficult or too dangerous to get to. That's the promise of these technologies.
That's remarkable. So it sounds like this is a field that's only going to get, more fascinating, more important as we move forward.
Oh, absolutely. Especially as the demand for, renewable energy sources continues to grow. Well diggers are going to play a vital role in the expansion of things like geothermal energy. We're talking about tapping into the Earth's heat to provide clean, sustainable power, and that's where well diggers come in.
Who knew that the future of energy could be, like, literally right beneath our feet?
Right.
Well, we've covered a ton of ground today, no pun intended.
Right.
From the physical demands and the technical skills to the environmental considerations and those, like, mind-blowing technological advancements that are on the horizon.
Yeah.
It's clear that well digging, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
It really is one of those fields that often flies under the radar, but it's essential to our lives in so many ways. And it can be a really rewarding, not to mention, well-paying career path if you've got the right stuff. And what I love about what RoleCatcher is doing is they're really providing valuable tools and insights for anyone who's curious about, exploring this unique and constantly evolving industry.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this and you're someone who loves to solve problems, who isn't afraid of a challenge, and, who's excited about being at the forefront of innovation, well, maybe well digging is that, like, hidden gem of a career you've been searching for. And if you're ready to dig a little deeper, pun intended this time, be sure to check out our show notes. We'll have a link to RoleCatcher's website where you can find out more. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.